What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, and people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguised Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin and presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu and website in the episode show notes below, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores ANT. In tonight's episode, I am joined by one of my favorite Twitter follows, one of my favorite guests to ever grace the stage with me here on Disguise Coverage, Mr. Bruce Nolan of Buffalo Rumblings, of the Bruce exclusive. Bruce, how you feeling?
It's a party all the time. Just disco balls, dancers, the whole thing, man. I'm having a blast.
It's an exciting time. We are in the midst of the legal tampering period, and we are here the night before free agency officially starts, even though it's kind of unofficially officially started. And we've got a lot to dive into for you folks tonight. We've got a Buffalo Bills signing to break down in terms of the player itself and what it means for this team. We've got some departures that we're going to talk about in terms of, you know, those players individually and their contracts and value. But again, what it means for the Buffalo Bills. We're going to talk about some free agent targets going forward, because there seem to be, Bruce, a multitude of guys for the Buffalo Bills fan base that, you know, they had pegged early on, like, oh, I love this guy. Oh, I love this guy. Oh, I love this guy. And all of those guys seemingly have dropped like flies up until this point. And it's starting to get a little thin out there in terms of wants and desires for this fan base.
Yeah, it is. And I think that that's one of the things that leads to anxiety is if no one else is making moves, then you don't really feel anything. It's the disconnect between the moves that other people are making and the moves that you're not making. That's the thing that always gets people a little bit anxious. You're like waiting for that one thing that's going to like quell your fears, or it's almost like activity is what they're mainly going for. And so it's interesting because we can talk ourselves into basically any player, right? That's the way fans work, right? We can talk ourselves into anybody, as long as it's not a re-signing of a player who you already had. Any activity is good activity. Like, you can talk yourself into anything.
Just sign someone.
Just sign somebody. Just do something, right? And that's the overwhelming discussion amongst a lot of consternation fans on social media is just do something, which I think we can agree is not healthy.
Correct.
Like, we can agree that's not a healthy mindset, but doesn't stop people from feeling that way.
And the one that always gets me, it's free agency and the trade deadline, when everyone's always like, oh, can't believe like they didn't do anything, or I can't believe they haven't done anything up to this point. And it's one of those like absence of evidence is not evidence of absence types of things for me, where you don't know who they called, you know, at the trade deadline to try and make a deal. You don't know what free agents they were in discussion with or negotiation with. And maybe, you know, some other team just offered a couple more bucks, or the situations that are also likely where, you know, player A signed for 3 years, $24 million with another team. Maybe the Bills offered him that exact deal, but he likes the other team better, or he likes the fit or facilities there better, or he's from that state, or he grew up a state away and that team's close to his hometown. Like, all the minutia that really starts to affect these deals and get into like the weeds of it. And yeah, and it goes to that like, well, inactivity is bad, activity is good. So just give me anything, give me something. And it generates that buzz and it generates that excitement. And when you're not getting it, it's almost like the lack of that stimulus equates to, oh, this is terrible. Oh, and it's always like they're not trying. They're not doing anything. Man, the team is really sitting on their hands. They could be in the war room for nonstop 48 hours at this point. And maybe they've been calling and trying to wheel and deal, but it takes two to play. And if the other guy isn't playing ball, then you're on your own, and that ain't going to work.
Do we really think that Brandon Beane is Buddy Nix and he just slept through free agency?
The guy
do we actually think that's what's happening based on everything we know about Brandon Beane? Do we think that's true? One of the things that I think is important at the trade deadline, and then I'm glad you brought that up, the trade deadline, because there's a lot of parallels there, and free agency, is it's important for me to note the deals where I go, hey, I would have done that if I was the Bills. So
Yes.
a couple people asked me, Bruce, why do you keep tweeting, I would have done this if I was the Bills? And the answer is because I'm bookmarking them for my show on Thursday, where I can go through the things that I would have done. Because the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of moves that I wouldn't have done. At the trade deadline, there are trades, and you go, okay, would you have done that deal? Would you have done that deal? And then inevitably we get mad about deals that we don't actually know could have been done. Like we go, man, why didn't we send a second for Kareem Hunt? You go, do you know we could have gotten a second for Kareem Hunt? Do you know that does he traded for a second? Things like that. So for free agency, you can go, okay, would I have done that deal with that person? And then you can start the conversation there. Start the conversation because you don't know if they would have done that deal.
That's
so
a huge point.
I think that it's important to bookmark the fact that there are going to be deals that have and will come out where you look to yourself and go, I would have done that if I was the Bills. There have been a couple safety deals already that have come out where I said, yep, I would have done that. I would have traded for Chuck Clark based on what the Ravens got for Chuck Clark. I would have done that, right?
Yeah.
I would have signed Epps. I would have signed Marcus Epps for what the Raiders signed him for. I would have done that. Both those deals I would have done.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that just saying, well, just do something. Okay, which one? Which one of these deals would you have done 4 years and $80 million for Jawan Taylor? Well, we needed a right tackle. Great. Did you need a $20 million a year right tackle for Jawan Taylor? Or were you planning on getting him and then flipping him to the left side? What the Chiefs are going to do, which I'm not entirely sure is that smart. Would you have done 4 years and $84 million for Javon Hargrave because you hate Ed Oliver? Like, you say, okay, well, do something. Okay, well, which one of these deals then? That's where we can start the conversation. Which one of these deals would you have done? And there's going to be some.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just impossible, especially with the amount of players that I think the fan base like attaches to in free agency. Same thing with the draft. Like, oh, I can't believe they didn't take this guy with this pick. And you still hear about it like years later. And with free agency, yeah, it's just impossible to not feel like that for, again, a healthy majority of the fan base. I would have, you mentioned a couple safety deals. I would have taken the Donovan Wilson deal at 3 years, $24 million. He's somebody who I was really impressed with when I watched him on tape. I wasn't expecting him to be as good in coverage and be as versatile in coverage as he was. I thought he was more just a box safety and a thumper. So, I would have done like a deal like that. But again, so that's one that was in my head. Like, I was like, oh, I would have done that deal if I were the Bills. And then it's like, yeah, but would the Bills have done that deal? And then the other one that I went to in my head was maybe the Bills offered him that same deal, but maybe he was like, no, I like it here in Dallas. I want to stay in Dallas. I don't want to leave. So I'm going to choose Dallas. Or there's all these variables and factors that go into any type of decision that's made. And it's so hard to really know the ins and outs of everything. I always take it back to also, I think it was an interview last year with Brandon Beane, and he was talking about the buzz and the connection that the Bills had with JJ Watt the previous offseason. And he was talking about how they never really got that far down the road with JJ Watt. They called him and were wanted to see what's up because, as you alluded to earlier, they do their due diligence on everyone. They kick the tires on almost everything. And he talked about once the media gets a hold of that, it spirals into something else. So whether you spoke to a guy for 5 minutes or you've been speaking to him for 5 hours, 5 days straight, it gets covered the same way. And so we very rarely, that's always stuck with me because we very rarely get actual details on how teams were involved on a player, how far they got down the road with potential free agents. Did they even make an offer? The Bills are interested in this guy. Well, are they actually interested, or do they just make one phone call and it was nothing, but it got flagged and it's been drummed up by the media as interest? Or did they get to the point where they were talking terms and talking brass tacks and trying to get a deal done, but then the player went somewhere else? And I think that's part of the anxiety with all of it for fans, because you don't know. You're just sitting and scrolling and refreshing and hoping that you see some sort of information. You see some sort of news. And when you don't, I think, the doomsday clock ticks for a lot of fans. It's well, they're not going to do anything. This is terrible. And everything's awesome, or everything's terrible, not awesome. But alas, here we are. We got some stuff to discuss. I want to bring up as well. So, I'm constantly, as we're going here, trying to check, but it's also hard to check news and also run the show. Bruce probably has a little better opportunity. Plus, he can hide behind the camera and do whatever he wants. But any news that comes through,
I'm not even paying attention now. You never know.
I figured it makes sense. Nobody pays attention when I don't even pay attention when I speak. I'm just rambling and just shouting things off. I saw the who came out? Someone we Bruce and I were talking about the Stephon Diggs restructure before we went live, but I know that was communicated in the chat. Anything that you folks see in the chat, it's tremendously helpful. If there is some news that drops now, something that needs to be communicated, DF Forever is fantastic. He says, "Yo, Ant, I got that covered." He says, "I'm watching Twitter and the Buffalo Bills forums." Fantastic. Communicate anything, just in case there's something that we are missing. This one got me. Bills clearing all the cap space to extend Boogie Basham 6 years and $130 million. Well played. Man, no, I don't even want to do an imagine thing, but that would shut things down. Whew. All right. So, folks, I mentioned earlier, what we're going to do in this episode, we do have a signing for the Buffalo Bills. We're going to break that down and then use that as kind of our initial start point as we navigate forward here on this episode. So, Bruce, let's start with that signing. Mr. Connor McGovern, a player with the exact same name as another Connor McGovern, who is not the Connor McGovern that the Buffalo Bills signed. It was confusing for people when they were trying to communicate like clips. I got tagged in a couple clips for the other Connor McGovern, and then that person realized that that was the wrong Connor McGovern. So a little annoying to start things with his early career for the Buffalo Bills. But let's talk about Mr. Connor McGovern, the one that the Buffalo Bills got from the Dallas Cowboys, a former third-round pick from the University of Penn State, played alongside Mr. Ryan Bates while Bates was there at Penn State. Let's start with your initial thoughts on Connor McGovern as a player. What do you like, dislike, overarching philosophy? What does this move, kind of mean to you?
This struck me as an early tenure move for the Buffalo Bills. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. This seems like the type of free agent signing that you make early in your team building, not late, which is interesting to me. This is the type of signing you would have seen in 2017 when McDermott had just gotten here, right? This is where you try and sign somebody who you believe is an ascending player. This is where you sign a player like Micah Hyde. You sign a player like Jordan Poyer. These are players. You sign a player like Trent Murphy. You hoped Trent Murphy was an ascending player, right? Yeah. Now you got it wrong, but you got it right with Poyer and Hyde. You sign these players who are in their mid-20s, who are coming off of their first contracts, and they usually have some sort of red flag that makes them not immediately jump to the top of it. Maybe they were backups for a while, like Connor McGovern, for example, right? Or they had injury issues, or they were stuck behind really, really, really good players, or something happened to them where they just suffered an injury, or something happened, but you believe that they're trending upwards. And that's the kind of signing that Connor McGovern is. It's not just, oh, well, we signed a good guard. Well, if he was a good guard, good guards are going for $20 million a year now. So the idea that you're going to sign someone and you're going to feel immediately really good about the fact that you absolutely 100% know who this player is going to be, that doesn't happen in free agency with less than $10 million players. That's just not how it happens. So this strikes me as a type of maneuver that you make as a franchise when you're at the beginning of your team building, not at the end. Which I think is interesting because it runs very, very counter to some of the free agent signings you've seen over the last couple of years for the Buffalo Bills. Yeah. It's almost a callback to 2017. So I think that's interesting to me. That always struck me as kind of strange because that's the type of player that you got. I mean, think about the free agent signings that have made note the last couple of years. Players like Mario Addison and players like Von Miller and
Daquan Jones,
more
established, right? Like more known quantities.
We know what you are, right? We know what you are, and so you have to pay for that. You have to pay for we know what you are. So I think that this is the type of signing I like in free agency. So I need you to understand right off the bat that I am biased toward this type of signing.
So you like this type of signing and then hate cover two invert.
I absolutely hate cover two. Yes, we. For those of you, we Anthony discovered something interesting about me before the show, and that is I absolutely have a disdain for cover two invert. The coverage, I absolutely hate it. I despise with every fiber of my being. And Anthony was like, I don't understand why you have such a strong hatred
So
for such a
random.
niche coverage. And I'm like, no, I hate this coverage. Like, I absolutely hate it. I hate everything about it. And it's just one of those strange things. Like, some people absolutely hate cucumbers, for example, for no apparent logic reason, right?
Fair.
This is me hating cucumbers. So I am biased toward this type of signing, because the reason I am biased toward this type of signing is, to me, free agency is not about getting expected value. It's about getting surplus value. And so often when you sign a known quantity, you end up 1 or 2 years into that deal with negative value, because you signed them at their peak for what they were, and then they fall off. Very, very, very few free agent contracts look good 3 years later. You know who did? Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. Think about the greatest free agent signings you can possibly think of in the history of this franchise and around the league, right? How often were they people who signed really, really big contracts? It just doesn't happen very often. It's usually people who are on the way up, and you got them for a value. Everyone was like, oh yeah, okay, well, maybe he can be a starter. Okay. And then he ends up being really good. So for me, I am biased towards this type of signing. And if you're going to do it, let's do it with a player who had a very completely reasonable explanation for why they weren't a stud starter earlier in their career. And also, they've started to show flashes. They're a really good athlete. And you have the right type of coach for that athletic lineman in Aaron Kromer. So for me, I am biased towards this type of signing, right? 100% biased toward this type of signing, because this is the type of free agency I want to pay. I want to play right here. I don't want to play in Javon Hargrave, who's 30 years old, for 4 years and $84 million. I have no interest in playing in that. I wasn't super interested in Von Miller last year. So like everyone's like, oh, I'm freaking out about Javon. I'm like, yeah, I got Von Miller. I mean, that's great, like it's all, but like, I don't play in that. That's not, if I was a GM, that's not how I would operate, by hunting gigantic games for 30 plus players. That's just not how I do it.
You want more upswing. You want to hit guys on the upswing rather than at their peak and potential downswing.
I want to hit people who have an archetype, and where I can look back in 2 years and go, man, what a deal that was. And even if Von Miller's really good, you're still not going to go back and think that. You're going to go, okay, well, you got what you paid for. Like, that's the best case scenario. The best case scenario is you got what you paid for. In my world, free agency, the best free agent contracts are one where you go back and go, wow, you got way more than what you paid for.
Yeah, wow, great value.
Right? Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, right? Great value, right? You saw something that the NFL didn't see. Or go get your pro scouts, get them to work, baby, because this is how you get things happening like that. So is this going to happen like this? Is Connor McGovern going to play out like this? I have no idea. Like we said, it happened for Poyer. It happened for Hyde. It did not happen for Trent Murphy, right? At all. But all three of them were the same archetype. And that's the archetype I want to chase. And that's the archetype that Connor McGovern is.
For me, he represents my biggest thing with the offensive line. And actually, I want to preface this by saying I did not think the solutions to making the Buffalo Bills offensive line like this revamped and improved group, I did not think those solutions realistically existed on the open market and free agency this offseason. The crop on the offensive side of the ball, I didn't think it was as strong as the defensive side. I didn't think there was a lot of top tier quality holistically in the offensive free agent grouping. But then even more so as you got down the tiers and got through the depth, which all of that means there's guys at the top who are going to get overpaid, like Mike McGlinchey. For me, I think that was a huge overpay by the Denver Broncos based on what he's been these past couple of years. And then the guys further down, like your second tier and your third tier guys, like everybody's getting paid above their tiers. Like, even, there were some things I liked about Ben Powers. I wouldn't have paid Ben Powers that contract based on what the Buffalo Bills needed. And I also thought, or have still thought, I would love the Buffalo Bills to have like a top 5 offensive line or a top 10 offensive line. I would absolutely love that. But my biggest thing for this offensive line has just been the roller coaster they are with the amount of variance that they have with the highs and the lows. The lows are significantly low. When you've got whether it's play to play or drive to drive or week to week, it's those highs that are coupled with those low lows where guys look severely outmatched versus top tier defensive linemen, or guys that lose very quickly, like a half second to a second overall, or especially in high leverage situations. It's that variance, it's that inconsistency. And my biggest thing for the offensive line, because again, I don't think it's feasible to come into an offseason and be like, you know what? The Buffalo Bills, need to get a top 5 offensive line going into like next year. What happened with the Kansas City Chiefs is more of an outlier than it is regularity, where one, Joe Thuney happened to be available. There is no Joe Thuney that was available this offseason in terms of the interior offensive line. So he is available. And then the Chiefs had the money and they got him. And then they hit on 2 draft picks in Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. So they revamped the entire interior of their offensive line and ended up with all pros. And that happened in one offseason. That's not the norm. So I wasn't expecting that. I wanted the Buffalo Bills holistically in this offseason, whether via the draft or free agency, to just reduce the variance and reduce the variables, reduce that roller coaster. I just wanted guys who could hold their own, who could maintain some semblance of consistency and not look outmatched when facing top tier talent and not show up as a deficiency or a vulnerability regularly on tape. And I think Connor McGovern is a positive step in that direction. I don't think he's a guy that, to your point, he potentially could be on the upswing, and maybe you get what you get this year and what you get next year and maybe going forward are the best versions of Connor McGovern. So what you saw in Dallas this past year and the years before, I do think he was better this year than in previous years. But what you got last year, maybe that's not even the best version. But even if it is, he represents a stabilizing factor for me. He represents some semblance of consistency. He's somebody who can hold his own. We'll get into some of his individual aspects in a minute here. But for me, like holistically, he just represents a stabilizing force. Roger Saffold came in last year and I thought he added, run blocking prowess, but we really didn't see that too much. We saw him trying to be a little bit of a square peg in a round hole in this Buffalo Bills offense, and having to function in space and having to block in this spread offense and block in these schemes that used more athleticism, all things which did not fit his skill set. His athleticism and his mobility were not what they needed to be for him to have success. And we saw deficiency from him. We saw the deficiency in the roller coaster that was Spencer Brown, where just from rep to rep, you have no idea what you're going to get. Like, he might look really great, or he might get beat and fall on his face within a quarter of a second off the line of scrimmage, which will absolutely wreck you. But I think McGovern, again, slides into, there's talk whether he's going to be right guard or left guard. He might like it on the right side better, and Ryan Bates might like it on the left. Who cares? I think right now he's your starter at guard. One of those spots. I don't think that's a novel concept, but to me, he represents a stabilizing factor for this offensive line. This offensive line, for me, with what Josh Allen can do in terms of his pocket navigation and his pocket manipulation, again, it would be awesome if the Bills had a top 5 or top 10 O-line. I just want the Bills offensive line to be like like 15th. That's it. But I want them to be 15th on a week-to-week basis or close to it. So one week they might be 15th. One week they're 16th or 17th. One week they're 14th or 13th. I don't want them to average out to 15th, where one week they're 5th and then one week they're 25th. Or I should reverse those. One week they're 5th and one week they're 25th and way down here. And it's that variance. I want to stop the roller coaster. I want to get off the roller coaster. That's it. If you're going to be 15th, be 15th. Don't be 5th and 25th. Don't be 1st and 32nd or and whatever it averages out to. Just be consistent. If you're going to be a middling group holistically, just be middling. And I don't want that to sound like a backhanded compliment or analysis of Connor McGovern, but I think he just raises the floor, and I'm fine with that. Like, just give me a floor. Give me some semblance of consistency.
Well, you have a floor. The problem is right now it's Roger Saffold.
Correct.
And Roger Saffold floor is not the floor I want.
And that floor has too much variance for me.
Correct.
Like, there's a lack of consistency in that floor. The bottom might fall out, which scares me and terrifies me. And so the addition of McGovern helps in that regard for me. Him as an actual player, what are your thoughts on him from a skill set piece, from a fit piece? What do you like? What do you dislike? Pros, cons, areas of opportunity, concerns. What are your thoughts on him specifically as him as a player, on him as a player?
The Bills have a type, folks. Like, you need to pay attention to this when you're going to drafting and you're studying free agent types, is that the Bills have a type, right? It's tall, long, a little bit light, good movers, right? These are the way. This is the way, right? If this is the Mandalorian, this is the way. Watch Connor McGovern on the move and realize that they were using him as an H-back in Dallas. Like he was a move fullback in Dallas for a lot of snaps. And there's a reason for that. It's because he blocks incredibly well on the move. And does that sound like another lineman that we have? I kind of feel like it sounds like Mitch Morse. Like, Mitch Morse is at his best on the move. That is where you get the best version of Mitch Morse.
Put him in space.
And it's not a scenario where he's going to blow people off the ball. So if you want a mean, nasty road grader who is going to blow people off the ball with power, force, and really, really heavy hands, I don't know what to tell you. You don't get to have that with Cromer and the Buffalo Bills. You get to have a lot of people who are really good athletes and move really well in space. And they're good shielding, they're good positioning, they're good escorting. This is a stay connected, feet before hands, get the usage correct, the placement, win your placement battles. That's what this kind of player is. And so Aaron Cromer wants people who are controllers. He wants you to be able to control the defensive player and control yourself. So if you get splashy, hard-hitting, punchy players like, Osiris Torrance, for example, right? I just don't think the Bills are going to be in on a player like that because they have a type, and their type is Mitch Morse and Connor McGovern. So I think that's the type of player you're getting with Connor McGovern. I think he's markedly better as a right guard than a left guard. And I would very much like to see Bates be the left guard and have McGovern be the right guard. There's a perfectly reasonable explanation for why he wasn't the right guard. And that's because the Cowboys have arguably the best right guard in football.
Yeah.
So, it makes sense. It's a little bit like a John Feliciano situation where you get somebody coming to you because the guy in front of them was all pro caliber. I mean, John Feliciano had Kelechi Osemele in front of him at his absolute pinnacle of his abilities. So he wasn't going to start for the Raiders. Like he wasn't going to. Yeah. Kelechi Osemele was in front of him, and it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, he got paid big time to leave Baltimore and go to the Raiders.
Yeah, and this is a similar situation to that.
You hit a lot of the strong points for the pros for me with McGovern. The functional athleticism. Seeing him be able to move a bit and what he can do. A lot of the pieces for me, I really like how he battles on every rep. I watched 5 full games of him last night. I watched the 49er playoff game, both Eagles games, the Packers game, and the Jags game. So a variety of different skill sets and rushers and defensive linemen. And again, literally, he battles on every rep. Like he's not a liability against top tier or quality opponents. You're watching him go up against Javon Hargrave. You're watching him go up against the Velociraptors that the 49ers have on their front. You're watching him pick up games and pick up stunts and twists against the Packers and against the Jags. And, you're watching him handle himself versus a variety of skill sets, especially in pass protection. And that to me was a huge boost. Somebody who you can't game up easily and just be like, you know what? Hey, it's 3rd down. Let's just put an edge rusher on the interior because this guy can't function like that. That won't happen with Connor McGovern. I like how you mentioned the archetype fit in terms of him being a Cromer kind of guy. Cromer loves guys who are active with their hands, who use their hands. That is arguably my favorite thing about Connor McGovern. His hands are extremely active. He is constantly resetting and refitting his hands, trying to get first contact. He uses a left-hand punch or stab very often in his pass protection reps, almost to the point where it's very predictable, but it's like he knows it's predictable. So he'll feign that and use that to try and set up defenders on the rush, or he'll, use it and then counter when they try to chop that arm, and he'll counter their counter. So I like the football IQ that he displays on tape. And you nailed it as far as like the run blocking piece. He's not a people mover. He's not the guy who's going to create displacement. He's not, blowing somebody off the ball and just widening the hole to the point where, Jerome Bettis can run through there easily. He's more of, used two of the words that I like, more of an escorter, more of a shielder. The one I like too is he's more of a shepherd. He's not like pushing you out. He's more
like, I like shepherd.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Come on, let's go.
I feel like I should have heard that before at some point, but I haven't.
Right. I wrote it last night and I was like, is this a thing to describe linemen? I was like, I'm going to
I've
use it.
never heard it that
Right?
way, but I hear it in special teams all the time.
Yes.
With specifically with gunners and jammers, right?
Mhm.
You hear shepherding as a word frequently with that, but I've never once heard it used to describe run blocking, and I kind of feel like I should, so I kind of like it.
Right. And just the ability to, yeah, like, come on, let's go. And be able to push them in that direction. So, shepherd, a shielder, escorter, he's not blowing somebody off the ball. He's going to use positioning. He's going to use his athleticism. Um, he's got a good anchor. When it works, it really works. Like you're watching edge rushers and defensive tackles try to use speed to power and bull rushes and go through him, and he'll just like hop once or hop twice and just anchor and stop. He had a rep. I tweeted it out yesterday against Javon Hargrave where Hargrave gets underneath him because he will play high from time to time, especially in run blocking, but sometimes in pass protection as well. And guys will get underneath him, but then he's able to like lose leverage. And even though he's the high man, he's able to get back underneath and anchor. And he gets knocked off the ball and driven back by Javon Hargrave, but he's able to anchor. And despite the fact that he doesn't have a lot of functional strength, he's able to like almost lift him and turn him outside to create an alley for Dak Prescott in the A gap, and Prescott just runs scot free up and escapes for like a 15-yard gain on first down. So he's got some really impressive reps against quality top tier opponents. Again, very good hands, very active hands, which makes him a guy that Aaron Kromer is going to be a fan of and will have a liking towards because of, again, he loves there's the coaching clinic we showed last year in the Cover One film room where Cromer literally says hands like 5 times. He's like hands, and he's rewinding like a clip from practice, and you're seeing like the hands and the technique being used in practice and what he likes and what he gravitates towards. So again, I don't think he's somebody who, maybe he turns into an all-pro. I don't think that's necessarily who they're getting. But at 3 years, 22.35 million. I know some people have that pegged as maybe an overpay, and I understand that given what he was kind of projected at. But I've come around to the monetary value based on studying the tape because, again, I think he's a good fit with how good he is as a pass protector, his athleticism, his ability to function in the run game enough given the type of style that the Bills have philosophically. Offensively, as a running team when they do run the ball. But I just think he raises that floor to a more consistent level and kind of helps things out a little bit. So overall, I'm a fan of the move.
One of the things that I don't think we talk about enough when it comes to line play is that leverage is a zero-sum game. I think that we don't talk about it enough, but it's a zero-sum game. You don't necessarily have to gain it; they just have to lose it, right? So, like when you have a situation like what you're talking about, where you have a player who gets knocked back off the snap. If I can get you leaning a little bit, right? I didn't really gain the leverage back. You just lost it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so everything that you lose is you losing relative to me, and everything that I lose is me losing it relative to you. So leverage being a zero-sum game is something we probably don't talk about the way we should. We talk about it a little bit when it comes to press coverage, but we don't really talk about it with offensive line play, which is weird because there's a lot of similarities between pass blocking and press coverage that we don't talk about. There's a correlation there that we should probably go. If I was more of a visual guy, like if I was more of a like put my face on the camera and go to the whiteboard and stuff and like pull out my dog and start pass blocking my dog, I think you would understand it a little bit. But there's correlations between pass blocking and press coverage that we don't talk about.
Absolutely.
But leverage is a zero-sum game. Like leverage, and so even if you have a guy who can recover well, a lot of times he recovers well, not because he necessarily gained leverage back. He just caused you to lose it, right? He knocked you off balance, right? He forklifted you a little bit. Like you just kind of lean a little bit. You lose a little bit of that forward momentum. You get off balance. I mean, think about the great example. Okay. Snatch. Okay. We watched you and I have watched Darnell Wright with a very hilarious snatch move, right? When you snatch somebody, you didn't gain leverage. They just lost it, right? It's just, you're pulling the chair off from underneath them, right?
It's literally, yeah.
Right. You didn't actually gain any leverage at all. They just fell, right? It's the same thing. This is the same thing with that, right? So it's a zero-sum game. You gained it by definition because they lost it, right? You didn't actually gain it back. They just lost it. So having a player who is capable of being somebody who can win without necessarily winning is a valuable trait, right? Because I just have to win relative to you. I don't have to dominate you. I just have to win. You have to lose. It's a little bit like Ant-Man, right? You
Nice.
have Kang say, "Did you really think you can win?" And Scott Lang says, "I don't need to win. I just need us both to lose." Right? It's like that. I managed to turn this all into an Ant-Man reference.
The whole comes full circle. I feel like this was your plan the whole time,
It really
just to be able to bring it. I mean, you're smart. You played me like a fool, like a fiddle. Well done. Actually, but no, I think that's very well said. The idea of, leverage is so much. It's just kind of like the swing of a pendulum, and it can shift just as quickly, like a misstep or a mishand placement or a misposition of your body, the right amount of force, the right amount of turn or torque. Things can change for you drastically. But again, he works well in that space. I think he adds some semblance of the floor for this team and this offensive line that, again, it would be great if they were going to be top 5 or top 10. I don't think that's realistic, like a realistic jump to make in one offseason. So just increase the consistency, get us off this roller coaster. Let's just have a nice smooth ride with not as many low lows and reduce that mercurial nature of this offensive line. I think he is a step in that right direction. It sounds like you are a similar spot. I'm going to grab this super chat from DF Forever, who says, "Who's the number one free agent you want on this team ASAP?" We will be getting to that shortly in this episode. So I'm going to keep that super chat in the back pocket. Your question will be answered. Appreciate you. Oh, RJ says a Marvel reference from Bruce. Drink? Oh, sorry, wrong show. He knows. He knows. He knows. Well played. Tremaine Edmunds, huge fan favorite amongst the Buffalo Bills faithful, a player that everyone
universally loved.
1,000%. A player that everyone can agree on is probably the best Buffalo Bill of all time. What my favorite thing about Tremaine Edmunds, aside from the tape, is his ability to unify the fan base. And just in times where we are right now in the world, it's easy to be divisive or see, houses torn apart by different political affiliations or just what goes on in the world. So it's nice to see some player like Tremaine Edmunds with the gravity to bring people together and unite people. But alas, he is no longer a member of the Buffalo Bills. He is a member of the Chicago Bears. His deal, 4 years, $72 million. That $72 million is the 5th most in the NFL for a linebacker, behind only Roquan Smith, like Roquan Smith, Fred Warner, Shaq Leonard. $50 million in total guarantees, which is the 4th most for a linebacker. $18 million average annual value, which again is the 4th most, behind only Roquan at $20 million average annual value, Shaquille Leonard at 19.7, Fred Warner at 19.045. So Tremaine Edmunds got signed like he is an elite premier linebacker in the NFL, potentially signed because of his production this past year or the upside of what he could become. Very interesting that the Chicago Bears shipped off Roquan Smith just to then give Roquan Smith kind of money to Tremaine Edmunds, but that's a conversation for another time. On the surface, Bruce, this deal, 4 years, $72 million, all the guarantees, the average annual value. Would you have given Tremaine Edmunds this deal? And how do you feel about losing him to this kind of deal?
I don't like losing him to this kind of deal, and I wouldn't have done it.
Okay.
I like Tremaine Edmunds, right? I think that there's a specific thing that is associated with having Tremaine Edmunds as your middle linebacker in this defense that you are going to see next year, but I don't think you're necessarily going to equate it to the loss of Tremaine Edmunds. And so I want to go ahead and prep people for it now. We spent a lot of time when Tremaine Edmunds was on this team talking about opportunity cost and things that were taken off of the menu for a quarterback in the pass game due to the Tremaine Edmunds' presence. If you looked about the middle of the field numbers for the Buffalo Bills and the deep middle of the field numbers for the Buffalo Bills were consistently among the best in the NFL.
Yeah.
Because quarterbacks just didn't really want to throw there. And there's because you have an albatross in the middle of the field. It's an opportunity cost. You heard Robert Saleh talk about it. Opposing coaches will tell you that there's certain things that simply get taken off the menu because of it. So what's going to happen is, because it's a different type of linebacker who has a different type of impact than Matt Milano. With Matt Milano, what you're seeing are the intrinsic positive plays. You see the splash plays from Matt Milano. What you don't see when it comes to Tremaine Edmunds is the stuff that otherwise would have happened. So what's going to happen is those things that Edmunds was protecting you from, they will occur more often this year, and you won't recognize the connection between why they're happening, because they're occurring because of the absence of Tremaine Edmunds.
Yeah.
Normally, it's really easy. You would think, oh, well, there were sacks and now they're not. You get rid of the splash plays. It's easier to recognize. But the other way around is more difficult. Now it's like, oh, there are sacks, but before there weren't. It's the opposite of that. You need to think about Tremaine Edmunds like losing a good offensive lineman. When you lose a good offensive lineman, you notice it because you notice it, and you didn't notice it before. It's the inverse of losing a big splash player like Milano or Von Miller. It's you all of a sudden start to see the stuff that now you wouldn't have seen before. So I need you to understand that the type of thing you're going to see is going to be plays that are now made by an opposing offense that were previously not made. Now, that's qualitatively the type of impact that losing Tremaine Edmunds would have. I still wouldn't have done it. Why wouldn't I have done it? I have zero interest in $32 million average annual value for off-ball linebackers.
That money should go to a running back.
I hate you.
I tried to keep a straight face. I
absolutely hate you. Off-ball linebackers are important, and they're really important in this scheme. There is no level of importance that makes that investment worth it to me. It's a little bit like the Austin Eckler discussion in Los Angeles. Austin Eckler has been the engine that has made that offense go for 2 years. He has been the dude. 107 catches from Austin Eckler. Justin Herbert is one of the only quarterbacks in football with a really good EPA per play when throwing to running backs. That's it. Like, normally EPA per play when throwing to running backs is always a bad idea. Like, only do it as a last resort. Everyone's like, oh man, he's a weapon in the passing game. Running backs are not weapons in the passing game. They are not as bad as a sack in the passing game. That's what they are, right? Find somebody who can do it not as bad as a sack, right? That's what I want when it comes to running backs and their ability in the receiving game. But when it comes to Eckler, you go, okay, yes, he has been the engine that has driven this, and that's been awesome. That's been fantastic. But do we want that money going to Austin Eckler? Yes, he's the engine that drives it. Do I want to pay? Does that mean I want to pay Austin Eckler $15 million a year? No, even if he is the engine that drives it, because it's still not smart. That's the way I feel about Tremaine Edmunds. I think Tremaine Edmunds is a good linebacker. I never thought he was trash. I thought he was okay for a couple years, but there are specific things that he does that you just don't go find another person to replicate. And those things I want to make sure I warn people about, that you're going to see stuff that you didn't see before because you don't have an albatross who can start at the line of scrimmage, turn, run with the tight end, flip his hips and make a play on the ball. Like, that's not a thing that linebackers do. That's a thing that nickel corners do, but they're not 6'5" and 240 pounds. So you need to accept that there are going to be things that you see next year because of the absence of Tremaine Edmunds that you didn't see this year. But that doesn't necessarily mean I would have done it, because I still wouldn't have done it. 4 years, $72 million, $50 million guaranteed. The out in that contract is 3 years and $57 million in. That's the out in that contract.
That's a
for
lot.
The Bears. So I wouldn't have done it, but I need people to recognize that it's still going to have an impact. And you need to be able to split those hairs. And I'm trying really hard to thread that needle right now. I'm trying to thread it where I say, listen, I need you to recognize that there's value there, and that when you lose it, it's going to matter. But that doesn't mean I would have paid it. It's the same conversation I had about Jordan Phillips when Jordan Phillips was getting ready to be a free agent.
Oh, okay.
You remember this conversation?
Yes, absolutely.
I wrote this article for Buffalo Rumblings saying, Jordan Phillips has been a great player. You're going to miss the splash plays. Don't pay him $10 million a year. And that went over like a sack of wet balloons. Like, it was terrible, right? People hated me.
Yeah,
Said
they
horrible
did.
things about me.
Yeah, it was rough.
He said horrible things about me. On the Twitter, on the social medias. He was not happy with me. Guess what? I was right. I was right. I'm not going to dunk on professional football players, but I was right.
But you are. But you're dunk away, my man.
So that's the way I feel about that.
No, I think that's fair. And you trying to thread the needle on that conversation is a similar spot that I'm in as well. I think his role was tremendously important to this defense. I don't think it's a role that you can easily fill with another player. I don't think his responsibilities mentally and physically are easy to place onto another player. It's not easy to replicate what he did here, even though, again, he was, coming under fire a lot from the fan base. But I'm in a similar boat. Like, I wouldn't have given him 4 years and $72 million. I wouldn't have paid him in the Shaq Leonard and Fred Warner and Roquan Smith area in terms of money. Like, I think Edmunds is a good linebacker. I think he was very valuable to this defense. That's a lot of money to pay for a guy who I don't think, we lost Bruce, who I don't think is necessarily on that level of the Roquans and Bruce is back playing games.
Well, and people were talking about running backs in the chat, so I just decided to duck out.
What's funny is that I was literally going to make that joke. I was like, look what you people did. Talking about running backs in round 1, you made Bruce leave and you made him upset. But yeah, I wouldn't have given him that much money. I don't think he's in the tier of the linebackers he's being paid around and being paid with. And then to your point, if you give him that contract, then he and Matt Milano are occupying a sizable chunk of your salary cap, and especially in a position like linebacker that is to a decent degree dependent upon the defensive line play in front of you. Like I think it makes sense for the 49ers to give Fred Warner that money. One, because I think Fred Warner is one of the best linebackers in football. 2, you've got a tremendous front in front of you, so he can play to the level that his traits and his skill set can allow him to play to because you've got the support in front of you. I don't think the Bills necessarily have that. Not saying that he was underutilized or not maximizing this defense, but I don't think you're getting the bang for your buck if you're giving that much money to that linebacker spot. So I'm in a similar spot as well. I did not want to see him go. I wanted to see him stay. I think he's important to this defense. I think, exactly to your point, you will start to see things this year or this upcoming season that you were like, man, I feel like I didn't notice that before. And it's like, yeah, because Tremaine Edmunds is gone. Like, the DVOA in the middle of the field consistently rose each year to being 1 and 2 the last 2 years, respectively, in part because Tremaine Edmunds' play and functionality and understanding in this defense grew each year. So I think there will be, a hole left in this defense, literally and figuratively, and we will see the repercussions of that. Now, it's all about how do you mitigate that loss. And Bruce, if you're trying to mitigate the loss of Tremaine Edmunds, because again, it is a loss. If you're looking at replacement options, do you think those replacement options exist in free agency? Do you think they exist in the draft? Like, where are you focusing on when it comes to replacing Tremaine Edmunds and trying to mitigate that loss in the middle of the Bills defense?
A lot of the linebackers that I wanted are off the table now.
Fair.
So, I mean, this is, I'm not loving my options at this point. I think that David Long was somebody that I liked.
Super underrated. And if he can stay healthy, that's a great signing for Miami.
I think that David Long is the Rashad Penny of linebackers.
Wow,
I think
nice.
he's an extremely, extremely gifted player. And I think that you get him at 2 years, 11 million is fairly low. Love that signing for the Dolphins. Absolutely hate it for me. But if you look at the people who are still on the board when it comes to linebackers, you have Zach Cunningham, who I'm not interested in. Zach Cunningham. Zach Cunningham is entirely a run stopping linebacker. Like, 100% is a run stopping linebacker. I would much rather have a coverage linebacker than a thumper, because I don't want to play in the world where I need to have a thumper, 2-down thumper. These are the types of players that don't help you in the pass game, either throwing the ball or stopping the pass. I don't value them meaningfully. Okay. So I think that Zach Cunningham is a player I'm not interested in. Levante David, I love, right? I've loved Levante David for years. If you go back and you search my name and the phrase Levante David, it will show up dozens of times. Every time it shows up, it is response to, this is a Levante David Stan account. He's the most underrated player in football. I love Levante David. Please marry me, Levante David.
I'm outside your house,
I'm
Levante
outside your
David.
vehicle. Why does Levante David have this restraining order against me? All these things like
Please
this.
forgive
right?
me, Levante David.
Right? I'm going to court with Levante David. I love Levante David, but he's still 33.
Yeah, that's
like I'm not. There aren't really a lot of good options. I love to take a flyer on a player like Devin Bush, right? Because he was never really a good fit in that defense, in my opinion, in Pittsburgh, and he's really underperformed. But he's a freak athlete, and he's 24 years old. So let's go throw a flyer at him. Let's give something small, because I don't think he's going to get a meaningful deal at all. Like I think Devin Bush is going somewhere for 2 years and $5.8 million or something. Like, I really think I don't think Devin Bush is getting anything. Yeah. But if there's anybody I trust when it comes to coaching back seven, it's this team. This team coaches back seven players. And yeah, you take a flyer on a player like that. Like Denzel Perryman, no, he's a thumper. I'm not really interested. I mean, Nicholas Morrow just signed, I think. Didn't he just sign today? Somebody go look up Leighton Vander Esch. By the way, Joe in the comment section says Leighton Vander Esch. He already signed.
2 years, $11 million. Very affordable.
So
I think Morrow is still. I think he's still a free agent.
Is Morrow still available? Okay, so maybe Morrow if he's still available. I didn't think he was, but I'm also crazy. So
Google, the internet can be a lie.
The internet can absolutely be a lie. I was big on a Landon Roberts 2 years ago. But now that I saw him in Miami for the last 2 years, I'm less big on him when it comes to Landon Roberts. I wanted him as that player who I thought had upside in get him at a decreased value. And then he got a chance to play more meaningfully in Miami. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm good.
I'm out.
Like I'm fine. Like I'm good. There's just not a lot of really good options. I mean, you remember Rashaan Evans, obviously he was a first round pick of the Titans from a while ago, right? They went out of their way to try and replace him. Right, old Buffalo Bill draft pick Tanner Vallejo. I mean, there's just not a lot of really good options out there when it comes to this. Old friend AJ Klein is back. I can totally see AJ Klein coming back for 1 year and $2 million. I can totally see that. That's a really significant thing. Mass in the comment section says Bills are drafting a linebacker in the first, and it'll be a huge mistake. Here's what I want. What I want for linebacker is the same thing that I want for right tackle. And what I mean by that is I want Terrell Bernard to be able to give an opportunity to show he can do it, but I want a hedge. It's the same thing I want for right tackle. I want Spencer Brown to get an opportunity to take hold of that job, but I want a hedge. So I don't need somebody to come in who is guaranteed to be the dude. I don't need Levante David, but I need a better floor than what I can see, because the floor for a player like Terrell Bernard is 0. Like that's the floor. The floor is terrible because we don't know anything about the guy. The guy has played 17 snaps, right? He's just not, there is no known quantity. So give me someone who knows the system like AJ Klein. Give me Nick Kwiatkowski, maybe. I'm fine with that. Yeah, completely okay with Nick Kwiatkowski. So if you want to get I don't need somebody to come in who I think is going to lock this job down for 1 year. Like I don't need Levante David on a 1 year deal. I'm fine with it. I love Levante David. If he sign, I'll be like, yeah, all right, good. Yeah, I love Levante David. Bobby Wagner. Yeah, okay, Bobby Wagner. I'm cool with all of them, right? Bobby Wagner's a Hall of Famer. Like, yes, I'm cool with this.
Absolutely.
But I want the same thing for Terrell Bernard that I want for Spencer Brown, which is I want to hedge against the idea that they don't become a dude. So that's what I need. I need to raise the floor. Like you were talking about with guard. I want to raise the floor. And the floor is not going to be Tremaine Edmunds, folks. It's not going to happen. Yeah, so it has to be Matt Milano and AJ Klein. So be it.
I'm in a very similar spot when it comes to right tackle. I like that your head is in a similar space as well. I'm trying to mitigate the loss of Tremaine Edmunds. My number one option, despite the age, I am going to go with Levante David. When you watch the tape, he's still got enough juice left. Like, no, he's not the linebacker that he was coming out of Nebraska. He's not the linebacker he was in his prime in Tampa Bay, but he can still get the job done. When you watch him on tape, you can still see him. He's still got some juice. He's got athleticism still. And I think what's also helpful is his efficiency in terms of his accuracy and quickness in processing and his ability to read and diagnose allows him to play fast and anticipate and get out in front of plays as they develop or before they develop. And I think that helps with, physical steps that he may have lost. I think he's gained some mentally. And then you look at some of the stats of the 93 linebackers with 20% of run defense snaps last year. He was 16th in average depth of tackle. He was 23rd in stops, 46th in stop percentage, tied for, kind of middle of the pack and lowest missed tackle percentage. And then if you look at the 80 linebackers with 20% of coverage snaps, 53rd lowest reception percentage, so not ideal, but tied for 10th in the lowest yards per reception, tied for 8th in pass breakups, 36th lowest rating when targeted. Tremaine Edmunds was wild. He had the 5th lowest rating when targeted last year at 78.7. Tremaine Edmunds had a tremendous year last year statistically and some stuff on tape. I am looking for, Bobby Wagner, I've seen that name thrown up a lot in the chat. I think he's more limited in a coverage role than Levante David is. And because that Edmunds role is so coverage focused or coverage important, I would lean David. I don't mind Bobby Wagner. He's still good coming forward against the run. He had a lot of really great advanced metrics and stats last year. Some people talking about him in the all-pro conversation, but he's lost more of a step in coverage. My worry when it comes to the draft, and I'm seeing Jack Campbell thrown into the chat a lot. I'm going to go back and watch his tape, but I know the combine results that he had, and I know the RAS score that he has and how tremendous it was for his size and his weight and his frame. He's fine in coverage. He's not awful. He's not a liability. I don't think he's going to give you the same level that Tremaine Edmunds will. Again, I don't know if anybody is, because it's hard to do that at the level that Edmunds did, because he's a unicorn or a pterodactyl or an albatross, like you labeled him. But I'm going to go back and watch Jack Campbell. I like Trenton Simpson from Clemson, but that's a lot to put on his plate. I also think he's better suited as like a big nickel and playing in space and outside the box than he is like a middle linebacker. Or even if you put him at a traditional kind of will in the Milano role and then you shift Milano to the middle, I think that gets a little wonky. I'm not a huge fan of Drew Sanders, but I am going to go back and watch the Campbell tape just to see how that fit aligns, because like you mentioned, the linebacker market is getting very thin. And now it's really coming down to, if you're looking for a known quantity, it's really going to kind of be Levante David or Bobby Wagner or some person that's like a lower tier potential stopgap. Like getting that known quantity to step in and mitigate Tremaine Edmunds' loss is dwindling by the day based on how the market is shaping up. So it's almost going to be David or Wagner or a lower tier question mark, or you're looking towards the draft. And all of those options have their varying levels of pros and cons, which we're going to get into a little more towards the back end of this episode after Bruce takes his lead. Bruce, we're going to end on one more quick topic for you. Give us some of your favorite free agent targets going forward. As the market has started to dwindle, where's your head at in terms of guys that you have pegged that you would really like to see the Bills go after in the coming days, or just, leading up to the draft?
First off, there's some comments going on here. They're like, oh, Bruce wants Klein and Bernard. Folks, the Buffalo Bills took Terrell Bernard in the 3rd round last year. They didn't do it with the idea that he was going to be a special teamer forever. I'm sorry. They didn't. At some point, they probably wanted him to play. So
That's fair.
I mean, I know that we were all weird about it when they took him, but this is the type of thing that would cause you to take him.
Yeah, and the idea of like, I think a lot of people have seen like, well, Bernard can't fill the Edmunds role, but maybe they kick Milano over more. He can play in a stack look. Like with the shifting that the Bills linebackers have done, he's worn that hat a bit, and so you shift Milano inside, you put Bernard in the Milano role, like that's a possibility.
Lorenzo Alexander has gone on record and said this. There's not a significant difference between the two linebacker positions for the Buffalo Bills. It's not like drastic. Like he's gone on record and said it's not that big of a, like it's not a huge difference between the two. There's coverage responsibilities that are different, but it's not crazy. It's not like I think we all think we're playing like Tecmo Super Bowl, right? And there's just very, very, very different roles between the inside linebackers and the outside linebackers. Like I don't think that's it at all. So for me, I still want Paris Campbell. I want Paris Campbell. Give me a 1-year prove it deal because he's been hurt. Again, deflated value, right? These are the types of free agents I want. People who could potentially outplay their deal. So give me Paris Campbell on a high potential ceiling thing where, there was a time there in the middle of last year where all of a sudden it was starting to look with him and Matt Ryan. It was starting to go. And then all of a sudden they benched Matt Ryan and it didn't really go. And then he couldn't quite get back on, but he stayed healthy.
Mhm.
And that's important.
Yes.
And so I would love to see a player like that. I know there's a lot of buzz about Jamal Williams. I'm okay with it. I don't want to do anything meaningful at running back. You know that. But if it's cheap, sure. If it's cheap. But I mean, if you told me I can give Jamal Williams the David Montgomery contract, 3 years, $18 million, I am totally out. I am all the way out on Jamal Williams at 3 years and $18 million. I'm all the way out on any meaningful expenditure when it comes to running. If you want to give me Latavius Murray for 1 year and $2.5 million, sure. Yeah.
Or Bijan Robinson in round one.
Yeah. No, but definitely not. But I think if you wanted to add a running back who had a little bit more power and you wanted to give, I'd much rather have a player like Latavius Murray at $2.5 million than Jamal Williams at $6 million. And I love Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is one of my favorite players in football. Like he's right up there with Hunter Renfrow as far as players that I just love to watch play football. Right.
Yeah.
Also, Bills Mafia would completely forget about the contract the second they got his first media availability.
Absolutely. He wears a Pokemon, he wears a Pikachu beanie to his interview. It's over.
Do you remember when Tim Settle was done and we were all like, okay, I love Tim Settle now. I didn't know who he was 15 minutes ago, but now I love him. It'll be exactly the same thing, only way worse.
I was gonna say, but the dial turned all the way up to 10.
Turned to 11, right? And so I think that's a player as far as Latavius Murray goes. If you really wanted to play in the running back market for a power running back and you want to have a complimentary back, I think that he's a player that you can just kind of plug in to a lot of those downhill runnings and just go, yeah, he knows what he's doing. He's a veteran downhill running back. If you want him to be your 1B and you say there's specific types of runs that I really want you to do, that's just the way it is. So I think that if you wanted to not bring back Jordan Poyer, there's some safeties that I would go with. I think that I'm scrolling through my notes here. I'm not a Terrell Edmunds guy. So if you were wanting to like
replace an Edmunds
with an Edmunds, I'm not interested in Terrell Edmunds at all. But if you got me a Nasir Adderley or Taylor Rapp,
Taylor Rapp is still
right.
Yep.
If you got me them a little lower, again, just 25-year-olds. This, you see where I'm going with this. This is the same thing as the Connor McGovern situation. So I think there are some safeties that I'd be interested in. There's a running back I'd be interested in. There's a wide receiver I'd be interested in. What about you?
Oh, you know what's tough is a lot of the guys who I had earmarked for this went right before we went live. I was going to talk about Samson Ebukam again from the 49ers. He got grabbed by the Colts on a 3-year deal up to $27 million, which is what I had him pegged at. So that one hurts doubly hard. I was going to mention LVE as a potential option. He got nabbed. I didn't love it, but I thought he'd be affordable, and he was at 2 years, $11 million. I like the idea of Paris Campbell. I like the speed. I like that he was healthy. I'm going to continue to bang the drum for this safety that you and I talked about before. And I know there's some logistical pieces with it, but I'm going to keep talking about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson just from the perspective of I want this defense to become a little bit more scheme diverse and multiple in terms of what they offer on a back end combined with how it connects to the front. And I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is a step in that direction. Having a safety that you can drop into the slot and have him cover slot receivers or tight ends, or have him function in the box and shoot gaps and play the run, or be in the box and drop deep, or play deep as a single high post safety or as a 2 high safety. I like the bite that he adds. I like the juice that he adds. I like the tenacity. I like the toughness that he adds. Now, I think he's going to be a little bit more expensive, or maybe even a lot more expensive, depending on how the safety market is shaping up, than Jordan Poyer. But he's 25 years old, and that combined with the scheme diversity for me is a target. Now, if they're not going to pay Jordan Poyer, potentially, I don't know if they're going to pay Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Probably not, because he's going to be more expensive, and his versatility might make him even more valuable on that open market. But he's the one that I'm going to continue day after day to bang the drum for. It was him and Ogbonnia Okoronkwo, and Agbo got signed to the Browns, and then I loved Ebukam. He's gone, so now my hopes are into the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson basket, although I do consider it somewhat unrealistic at this point. But that's
also the greatest trash talker in the entire league.
Yeah, I mean, when you like we talked about earlier, like offline, like when you get your own teammates to fight you, there's something to be said for that. But then, his teammates and coaching staffs that he's been a part of have spoken highly of him. I know he's got some off the field stuff potentially, but he's cleaned up that to a degree, I believe. And I just like the Swiss Army knife. He's a weapon on defense, and I want that for this defense, given what they need to combat in the AFC in hopes of potentially getting to a Super Bowl title.
I'd like to make a point real fast about the Eagles while we're here.
Sure. Oh, I feel bad that I kept you long, so feel free. You talk.
I want to talk about that because here's the reason why. We have a tendency to only get focused on our own team, and we say things like, well, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards, right? Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to just take a peek over at what's happening in Philadelphia. They're going to lose both their safeties, right? They're looking to trade Darius Slay. They just re-signed Bradbury. They lost a linebacker, right? They lost Javon Hargrave. So they lost a starting defensive tackle who's really good. They're going to lose a starting linebacker who's good. They're probably going to lose one of their two corners who's good. They're going to lose both their safeties. Okay? Like, folks, teams lose stuff. Like, that's what's happening. And the Bills are set to lose, Tremaine Edmunds and maybe Jordan Poyer, right? And so I'm not saying that you shouldn't want to keep players. That's not what I'm saying, right? By any means. But every team loses good players at some point. Like, that's the way it works.
Good players and good coaches. Like, it's part of being a successful team.
Part of the deal. And if we get wrapped up in the whole, well, the team's not going to be better last year. Think about this for a second. Well, the team's not going to be better. Are we going to have a healthy Von Miller next year? Maybe.
Maybe not until November.
Right? Maybe not. Would you rather have Von Miller for the first half of the season or the second half of the season? Right? So, and then you have things like, okay, what about players that you think might be better next year? Players like Spencer Brown, who didn't have any offseason last season at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't think about this stuff. We only think about paper in and paper out. And paper in and paper out's great, but you can have a team that looks worse on paper and performs better, because that's a real thing that actually happens like all the time.
Like the Kansas City Chiefs offense.
Like everyone was, oh, it's Tyreek Hill, and they ended up Patrick Mahomes won the MVP and their offense was better. Like, it's just, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be
trade Stephon Diggs.
That's what you're saying.
That's what you're saying. That's
not what I'm saying. Also, he just restructured. So if there was ever a hope that potentially the Stephon Diggs was going to get traded, not going to. They just restructured him again.
Someone's still going to say that though. They're like, no, it makes it easier to trade it.
No, it does not. Like, what was it? Something like, was it 35 million in dead cap? Yeah, now it's going to be like 42 or 41 million in dead cap now. It'd be like the highest dead cap in history for a player who wasn't a quarterback. Yeah, if you were to move from Stephon Diggs, that's not happening. So I think we need to just take a deep breath here. Good teams lose good players, like that happens, and we're good.
I think that's very well said. I think that's very well put. And I think it's a nice way to end your appearance here. I know we went over a little bit, which
I'm shocked.
You know what? No, I am though a little bit, because we've been really good. Like, we've been good on getting you. If it's 45 minutes, you're out in like 44, maybe 46. But this is free agency week. But Bruce, you were as delivered and as advertised as always. I appreciate the hell out of you. I'm sorry for taking up so much of your time, but I appreciate you stopping by and staying a little bit. I knew when you had some more things to say, and I was trying to get you out, and I was like, oh, he really wants to say what he has to say, because I know.
Well, it's something I had on my mind, and I don't know if I'm going to get to it on my show this week. And I thought, I'm already here, and so let's just do it. And the comment section has been so unbelievably awesome tonight. They're so engaged. They're always out there, dialoguing with us, and it makes it so much easier because they can give you points to jump off.
Yes.
And so when you have a great comment section like we had tonight, it makes it so much easier to go off on tangents.
Absolutely. That's very well said. I'm going to go off on some more tangents and continue this episode and discuss a bunch of points from the chat and some super chats and some other things in my notes. But Bruce, I'm going to set you free in hopes that you will fly back to me someday. But just in case people don't know who you are and what you do and where they can find you, plug all your stuff and your socials and anything and everything. The floor is yours.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Anthony. You know that I appreciate it every time. It's an honor. You and I don't get a chance to do it very often because your show's on Wednesdays and I record all my stuff on Wednesdays.
I'm on Tuesdays now, though. I'm on Tuesdays at 9 going forward.
You know what? It's So that's dangerous now.
I know.
It's really dangerous.
I know.
So now that you're
Might just be
Tuesdays, I didn't know you were Tuesdays permanently. Did I miss that announcement? When did that happen?
like 2 weeks ago,
Oh,
3
okay.
weeks
So I'm,
ago.
I'm not.
So
I'm not super late.
no, so this is like the permanent thing going forward. So we might ride
Well,
again.
we might write again. That'd be fun. So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Bruce Exclusive. I'm the guy, with all the weirdness, and I just I have great fondness for Anthony. He's one of my favorite people in the entire community. So I'm
Oh,
just
thank you.
glad that he is allowing me to be continually back on the show. Comment session. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for engaging and for the questions and the comments and even the stuff when you thought I was crazy for just saying you want to hedge against, Terrell Bernard, those things like that. So I appreciate all of you. I love you all dearly. And thanks for having me, and I'll catch you later.
Absolutely, Bruce. Godspeed, and thank you again.
Catch you later.
Mr. Bruce Nolan, one of the best in the business. Appreciate all the kind words from the chat for Bruce. He's awesome. I enjoy recording with him every time. We DM a bunch. Yeah, he's genuinely one of my favorite folks. I'm glad you folks feel the same way as well. Oh, man, you just missed it as he left, saying, Bruce, we still want halfback in round one. That's something that we talk about a bunch because I would be fine with Bijan Robinson in round one. He would not. I'm sure I'll have him back before the draft, and we will discuss that and some other pieces. We're going to trudge on in this episode as we do here on the show. We, had the first half with the guest, send the guest on their merry way. And I'm going to continue solo. But before I do that, I'm going to mention the sponsor. You folks know the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, One Pie Pizza. You could find the online link in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. Delicious sweet sauce pie, fantastic cheese to sauce ratio, cup of char pepperoni. They make their own homemade blue cheese. They got a whole bunch of other really great snacks and dishes that they make. They've got unique pies. They've got traditional stuff. They're truly the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Again, find that link in the episode show notes. The only thing I love more than their food, and I talk about it every week, and I genuinely mean it, is the type of people that they are, the partnerships that they have with the community and what they do to try to better the community, whether partnering with Roswell, whether partnering with Toys for Tots or the ASPCA or the Alzheimer's Foundation. They give back a lot. They're very Buffalo focused and community focused. And even if you don't care about any of that and you're all about yourself and you just want something that tastes great, the pizza's there for you. They're one of the best. So go check out that online link. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza. You will not be disappointed. I promise you. I want to grab this starred comment from DF, who mentioned this back earlier in the episode. He said, defenses are evolving. Well, one, thank you very much for the super chat, DF. I appreciate it. He says, defenses are evolving, playing more dime. Does Buffalo evolve without a Tremaine Edmunds? So I will say this. I don't know if that linebacker role, the way that linebacker role has been constructed, the middle linebacker role, or however you want to, if you're focusing on Edmunds as the middle linebacker or just one of two linebackers, Edmunds' role has very much been created and sort of tailored around his skill set. What is asked of him isn't necessarily going to be asked of whoever plays that position because they can't do what Tremaine Edmunds does. We saw that when he went down. Terrell Dotson took his place, and we saw Dotson try to do some of the things that Edmunds does regularly, and he could not. And that's through no fault of his own. Again, Edmunds has a very unique frame and athletic archetype, and it allows him to do some of these extraordinary things that are asked of him in this Bills defense. Without Edmunds, again, if you're trying to replicate that role, I think the best chance that they have right now is to grab Levante David. I think he's not going to be a like-for-like replacement. I think he is better coming forward than Tremaine Edmunds and playing the run and shedding and reading what's going on in front of him. But he does not have the athletic profile anymore to do what Tremaine Edmunds can do currently. So you're going to see some drop-off in that regard. But he's such a good player still, even at his age, that I think he can mitigate that loss a little bit. If you're not getting Levante David, it's going to be a different kind of role for me. Like, again, if you bring in Jack Campbell or you bring in Trenton Simpson or you bring in Bobby Wagner or anybody else that, you've got your eye on or you're focusing on to replace Tremaine Edmunds, or again, even if it's in-house, if Matt Milano is going to shift to that role and you're going to start Milano and Bernard, Milano is awesome. I've always maintained that I thought Milano was extremely underrated and I thought he was the better of the two, but his skill set isn't like Tremaine Edmunds' skill set. Now, that doesn't mean that he's worse than Tremaine Edmunds, but you're not going to ask him to do the same things. He functions in a different way. Again, in a very good way. He's an all-pro linebacker. But I think that role would tweak. And then because that role tweaks, I think the nature of the defense tweaks. So yeah, I think maybe you do see a bit more dime. Maybe they go more 3 safeties. Maybe they do add a thicker type of running back on the low end. And, that would be not favorable for me, because I think you have the opportunity to potentially get dictated to. But maybe they go for more of a rotation base at that linebacker spot. Again, maybe they do go dime. Maybe they roll with 3 safeties. Maybe they shift coverages, and maybe they play more single high to try to mitigate that loss on the interior of the defense, in the middle of the defense where Tremaine Edmunds used to be. I think, long story short, the defense is going to change in terms of how they operate drive to drive and down to down, because they have lost Tremaine Edmunds. If you replace him with Levante David, I think the changes are mitigated. There's less changes. But if it's anyone else, even if it's Bobby Wagner, who I still like, again, he's not a liability in coverage, but I think a lot of people are still seeing him as like Seattle Seahawks Bobby Wagner, and thinking of the plays that he made there. I'm going to dive into the tape actually later tonight, or as this week goes forward, to really drive some things home with Bobby Wagner. But I think he's still getting by a lot on his name in terms of what he used to be. Again, I would take him. I think he's a fine player. He helps mitigate that loss a little bit, but you're still going to have to tweak that role, because he's not capable of doing what Tremaine Edmunds was doing. But again, I think that's to be expected to a degree, based on, again, whether you liked him or hated him, or you thought he should have stayed and you would have paid him whatever, or you thought he was overvalued and you're saying good riddance. At the end of the day, Tremaine Edmunds was an extremely unique player, and that role was built around his uniqueness. So we'll see what happens from that. But that's a very good comment there, DF. Now I'm just saying Bobby Wagner was the highest ranked linebacker last offseason. Was he? I mean, it also depends on like who's ranking it and how are they ranking him and what are you going with. Again, he does a lot of good things. He's still very instinctive. He can process everything that's going on in front of him. I trust him to diagnose and play against the run. And again, he's not horrible in coverage, but he's older and he's got a lot of miles on the tires. I just don't think, he's not Seattle Seahawks Bobby Wagner. And I don't think anybody should expect him to be. Again, he's several years removed from that. There's a reason Seattle kind of not pushed him away, but was willing to let him go. And there's a reason the Rams also moved on from him as well. Like, there's a reason he's a free agent at this point in his career, based on what he can do. And again, I don't think that's terrible. Oh, PFF ranked Bobby Wagner as the best linebacker last year. Teach their own. I would be okay with Bobby Wagner, but I'm not expecting him to come in and be an upgrade from Tremaine Edmunds or be a better linebacker than Tremaine Edmunds. Again, I would welcome him. But that's a lot to ask for him. And again, talking about the college piece, I wanted to touch on it a little bit, because again, I saw the names coming through. Oh, I actually want to grab this comment from DF. DF says, it would be cool having a show and opening a link to Cover One fans that wish to chime in and have a big group discussion. I'm going to mark that. See what we can do going forward. Interesting. Real quick, for those of you who are still in here, because we still got a ton of people in here, if you are able to drop a like on this video, it goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes. So if you are enjoying this content, please, and thank you, drop a like on this video, whether you're watching live now or watching post live later. Please drop a like on this video. It goes a long way, please, and thank you. I want to grab this comment from Mass. He says, Anthony, what are your thoughts on drafting a wide receiver in round 1? Do you think any of the top 4 wide receivers will be there at pick 27? Depends on who you're classifying as the top 4. I honestly, I've talked about it a bunch. Like, this wide receiver class is so murky. The strength of it is slot receivers and Z receivers. There's not a lot of true number 1 X receiver potential. I think whoever you think is the best receiver in this class, I think if you put him in last year's class, is probably like the 5th or 6th best receiver at best. But I still think there is usefulness. I think if you're looking for someone with wide receiver 1 potential, I don't think this is the draft class for you. I'm okay with drafting a receiver in round 1, especially based on how free agency is started right now. It just depends on who you get and what you're expecting. Like, So, I have Jackson Smith and Jigba ahead of Zay Flowers. Like the two fits that I would love. I like Jordan Addison as well. And I know he didn't run a great 40 at the combine, but he was also nicked up in his back coming into it. And that may have affected him running his 40. He also didn't finish the combine. There's some murkiness there. But if you took a Jordan Addison, he can play in the slot. He also can play some Z for you. If you take Zay Flowers, he can play in the slot. He can play some Z for you. Both of those guys have different skill sets, though. Jordan Addison is more of a polished route runner, more of a technician, more in the Stephon Diggs type of mold in terms of what kind of receiver that he is. Whereas Zay Flowers is more, he's got less polish to his route running than Jordan Addison, but he's more run after the catch. He's got more athleticism. He's got more physicality to his game. He's someone you want to just get the ball into his hands. He's going to work those intermediate areas and the deep areas and get you chunk plays and, again, generate yards after catch, whereas Jordan Addison can work underneath more, will leverage more space, has more experience and a more polished route tree based on what was asked of him at USC. But then again, I go back to Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I really, really love, but he's going to be a slot guy. Like, you're just expecting him to be in the slot. There is no real inside-outside versatility with Jax as there is with an Addison or a Zay Flowers. I also really like Josh Downs from North Carolina. I would love to get him in the second round. I don't know if he's going to last all the way to the Bills in the late 50s, but he's someone that is probably slot only. He plays a little bigger at the catch point. Jax does to a degree as well, but those guys are more slot only. And I think some of this also depends on what you do with Khalil Shakir. Is Khalil Shakir going to be in the slot? Do you think he can live on the boundary? He had almost, I believe it was close to being like a 50-50 split last year in terms of his snaps in the slot versus his snaps outside. So if he's going to be your slot guy, I think you're looking at different options on the outside. Is it a Jordan Addison? Is it an A.T. Perry, someone who's got the size and frame to potentially be an X and who I actually like a decent bit? Or are you going even later and you're looking for like a Jonathan Mingo? Or again, if you're going to put Shakir on the outside, then you're looking more towards those slot options. I would be okay with drafting a receiver in round 1. I don't love it. As of now, I still want to go offensive tackle. My dream is still Darnell Wright falls to the Buffalo Bills. That's been my wish and my dream since seeing him at the Senior Bowl. I spoke to him at the Senior Bowl. He had a good week. I really like his tape. I was really impressed with what he told me when I interviewed him and how professional his approach is to the game of football. So I'm still leaning offensive line. Or some dark horses. Like if Nolan Smith falls, I know it's an edge. I would welcome that. If Bijan Robinson falls, and depending on how the rest of the board looks, I'd take Bijan Robinson. There's a couple other defensive linemen I really like as well, but right now I'm still leaning towards offensive line in the first round, but I'd be okay with a receiver in round 1. I know that was a very long answer, but it's a complicated question. Oh, DF says that's a myth. Wagner was not the highest rated linebacker. Ooh, drama. Oh, awesome stat poll from Kendall. Kendall says Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, CJ GJ, is one of 6 defensive backs since 2019 with 10 interceptions, 30 pass breakups, and 10 tackles for loss. The others are Justin Simmons, safety for the Broncos, Tyrann Mathieu, Harrison Smith, Jalen Ramsey, and Kenny Moore. Ooh, Kenny Moore, awesome pull on that name. He's one of the best nickel corners in the game. Him and Hilton and Terry Johnson are really up there for me. I love Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I've been banging the drum for him on Twitter. I've been banging the drum for him in podcasts. Again, this is, I don't know I think there are some questions in terms of the monetary piece, but again, the Bills have freed up more cap. I think there is a realistic avenue in which they can afford him. I don't think that's necessarily a question, but again, he will be somewhat on the expensive end for a safety, but he's 25 years old and the versatility piece is huge. I want more for this defense and to really get over the hump. I think you need to reduce the predictability and you need to add more variance to your defense. You need to, again, I'm going to go to the adage that I used last offseason. You're playing rock, paper, scissors. You need to be able to throw rock, paper, and scissors. The odds of you winning when you play rock, paper, scissors, if you can throw all 3, go significantly up. If you're playing rock, paper, scissors and you can just throw rock, the odds of you winning aren't great. Because if you're just throwing rock and your opponent throws scissors, sweet. But guess what? What happens if they throw rock? Then it's a stalemate. What happens if they throw paper? You're screwed and you lose. I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is a move towards that versatility and that variability on defense. He reduces how much you can be dictated to. He allows you to play more games pre-snap. He allows you to change the post-snap to pre-snap picture or pre-snap to post-snap picture, depending on how you're looking at it. again, just a safety you can drop down in the slot and have him cover one-on-one against a slot receiver or against a tight end, or you can blitz him, or you can have him just come in run fits, or you can have him fill from depth. You can play him in single high post safety looks, cover 1 and cover 3. You can play him in any cover 2 look. You're rolling cover 2, cover 4, cover 6. He can play match coverage. He can play your regular spot drop zone. There's a lot that he can do. He's one of those Swiss Army knives that are like kind of the jack of all trades that is really good at all, those trades. It's, what is it? You know, jack of all trades or master of none or whatever that, adage is that's used to be like, well, this guy's kind of like good at everything, but he's not really, really good at one thing. That's why he does so much. No, he's a true chess piece on defense. And I want that for the Bills defense. He will continue to be my number one free agent ad for this Bills defense. Although he and Levante David are kind of closing in on one another a bit, but that's where I'm at a little bit on that one. Oh, NFL Draft Fanatic says, can you describe XYZ skill set differences? Sure. So those are the receiver positions. So your X receiver is on the line of scrimmage. He is your traditional number one type of receiver. If you're thinking about an X receiver, you're thinking someone like a Julio Jones, someone who can kind of do it all, right? Now, they don't necessarily have to be as big or as fast, but it's more of a complete receiver, a receiver who can get vertical, who has a polished route tree, who can run a variety of routes at a high quality level, has a good release package. You're not afraid of them getting jammed, can function against double teams, can function against press coverage, can handle going up against, the number one corner or being bracketed or double teamed. Like I mentioned, again, this is your more number one guy, your complete receiver guy. The Z receiver is more of a movement guy. That's your flanker. That's the guy who is usually off the line of scrimmage on the same side as the tight end, more movement to him. This is the guy you can put in motion, short motion, or coming across the field. Usually, quote unquote, the more athletic guy. This is more of your run after catch guy than it is your prototypical number one type of receiver. The Y position is usually just referred to like the inline tight end. Still to this day, you have the Y, and then you have like the F tight end, which is more of like your move tight end. The F tight end can be a move tight end. It can be a fullback. It can be an H back, or if you want to call it an H instead of an F. But those are really like the main differences from those skill set pieces. Chris saying Hunter Renfrow is nice. He is nice. I would welcome the addition of Hunter Renfrow to this offense. Charles saying, how about Corey Davis? He can play inside, outside, and he's a good blocker. I still like Corey Davis from his time at Central Michigan. I always confuse Central and Western. Yeah, no, Western Michigan. I don't remember. One of the non-Michigan Michigans. He never hit with Tennessee. He was a top 10 pick. He was a really high pick. He never really clicked there. He started to do some things in New York, but then got banged up. I'd be okay with Corey Davis. I think you need to increase the diversity of skill sets in this wide receiver room for the Buffalo Bills. So I would welcome that. I don't think he's going to cost too much. I'm okay with taking a guy like Corey Davis. Again, give me versatility, give me athleticism into this group, a diversity of skill set, and going here in this point like that. That's what I'm okay with for Mr. Corey Davis. Boom, 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 boom. Well, I think this comment here from Jared saying, I don't think you should try to replace Edmunds with someone to do the same job. I think the defense will adjust to whatever they can do with the new guy and his skill set. Agreed. That's been like my main semblance. Like if you're losing Tremaine Edmunds, the nature of that role has to change a bit. And by extension, the nature of the defense has to change a little bit. You're not going to bring in anyone at this point to, you're not bringing in a round peg to fit into a round hole. Like there's going to be some kind of non-ideal fitting that happens there. And so you got to tweak stuff, whether it's the role, whether it's the defense around the role, but it's not going to be a like for like and just throw someone out there. This is an awesome answer from Justin saying that he would throw Spock when it comes to rock, paper, scissors. Well done. I like this answer from Joe too, saying, what if it's a really big rock? That can work. That helps if it's a really big rock, but still going to lose to paper. Still going to lose. Claude saying he likes Corey Davis or he loves Corey Davis, but he's never healthy. Yeah, that's a fair piece. The health is going to come into it, right? And especially for a group like the Bills weaponry, where you're looking for more consistency, you're looking for more effectiveness. You need someone who's going to, again, the best ability is availability. So that factors in. Anthony coming in, great name, Anthony, and says Adam Thielen? ? I'd be okay with Adam Thielen. My worry with Adam Thielen is he's not going to separate versus man at this point. He's 32 years old. He was never the most athletic or the most fleet of foot type of guy. So it's even more so now that he's older and he's got more miles on the tires and he's a little longer in the tooth. He's smart, he's crafty, like he always has been. That's how he made his name in the NFL. He can leverage space, he can find openings. But I want more of a guy who can separate versus man in this offense that isn't Stephon Diggs. So I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I don't know if I like the fit given the needs that this offense has, right? I would like a little bit more speed. I'd like someone who can stretch the field vertically, and I'd like somebody who can consistently win against man coverage. I only watched one game of Adam Thielen's this year. It was one of the games against Detroit, and he just looks like he's moving it in quicksand at times. He's got some burst and some ability here and there, but it's just going to be hard to rely on him to consistently win with craftiness, given the defenses that the Buffalo Bills are going to face and the athleticism and speed that the Bengals defense has and the Kansas City Chiefs defense has and the Miami Dolphins defense has and the Jets defense has. Like, it's going to be tough to combat that given where he is in his career. I'm not totally against it, but it's not like my top or ideal move. Love this comment here from NFL Draft Fanatics, who says 246 watching, but only 111 likes. Let's get those likes up there. Please, 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 and thank you. If you have an account, drop a like on this video. It is greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. Please, 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 and thank you. One piece, again, I want to mention, I know the hype around Jack Campbell that's developing a bit, and I'm sure if the Bills don't sign a linebacker, I'm sure you will see more mock drafts starting to mock linebackers to the Buffalo Bills in the first round, whether it's Trenton Simpson, whether it's Drew Sanders from Arkansas, whether it's Jack Campbell in the first or maybe even the second round potentially if they think he's gonna land there. Keep an eye out for the people who break down tape of those players, and I'm not just saying it because I'm one of those players, but statistics and just raw data, even like our relative athletic scores, which I am a fan of. I'm a fan of RAS scores for players. Those don't necessarily tell the whole story in the picture. And I'm seeing some of the narrative of how much of a tremendous coverage linebacker Jack Campbell can be because of his relative athletic score and how well he moved and this and that. And well, he can fill Edmunds' role and he can cover. And again, you don't necessarily see that on tape. I am going to dive back in. I watched a couple games already. I'm going to look into more, see maybe if there's something that I missed. Because again, his performance at the combine, I wasn't expecting him to test that well. So I am going to go back and be like, okay, maybe I missed something and check out some different games to really confirm what I have. But keep in mind that the tape never lies, and that is your best way to see what a player is, who they are, and what they are going to be. So, and again, I'm not saying that to plug myself, but keep an eye out for everyone. There's plenty of really good people on Twitter and on YouTube who break down game tape and who break down film. Again, I am one of those people, but again, just keep an eye out for that. Just looking at a combine score and seeing what someone ran in the 3-cone and the shuttle and the 40, and then seeing a highlight package on YouTube and being like, this is the guy, I want him. That can be misleading a little bit potentially. Ooh, Trek Reviewer says, who is more likely at running back, Derrick Henry or Dalvin Cook? Probably Dalvin Cook. In terms of a likelihood standpoint, I still don't think Tennessee gets rid of Derrick Henry because he is the focal point of that offense, like completely and holistically. So I think the Bills have a higher, again, I think Dalvin Cook is more likely than Derrick Henry. I still don't know how realistic either of them are, though. Joe says, DJ Chark still available. Thoughts? I like DJ Chark. I liked him going back to his time in Jacksonville. I liked him at LSU. Can stretch the field. He can get vertical. He's had some injury concerns. Again, not just this past year, but early in his career. My initial thoughts with him were that he was going to cost too much. I thought he was at the top of the free agent class, which, no disrespect to DJ Chark, kind of tells you a lot about the wide receiver free agent class, that he was at the top. But him and Juju and Jacoby Myers, I thought they were going to get paid a lot. But again, I also thought Jacoby Myers would get paid more than he did. So maybe Chark is a little more affordable. He signed a 1-year deal last year to be with Detroit. I don't know if he's looking for a multi-year deal, how much money he's looking for. If he's affordable, I would welcome him. I like his skill set. He can work in the slot. He can work outside. He adds speed. He adds athleticism. I would be okay with a DJ Chark. Pop says, do you want to add another free agent O lineman? I would, from a depth perspective. I'd like to add someone like Jermaine Illuminor, who I broke down in the film room last week from the Raiders, a guy who has right tackle experience, right guard, left guard experience, has some versatility, is probably cost effective, depending on how you define cost effective. I don't think he's someone that's going to cost more than, $3 or $4 or $5 million a year in average annual value. I like his versatility. I would like to add more of a known quantity. I don't necessarily know how realistic that is, but I want to add to the offensive line, whether it's free agency, whether it's the draft. Again, I'm going to continue to say it. Darnell Wright, the right tackle from Tennessee, has been my dream number one selection for the Buffalo Bills at pick 27 in this upcoming draft. I'm going to continue to hope and pray for that. But I think the Bills need to continue to work on this offensive line, not just for 2023, but for beyond, in terms of securing this group and giving Josh Allen some year-to-year consistency. Oh, Walter says, Eckler is everything that Bean says he likes about McCaffrey and Kamara, but with a better performance than them both, but with less wear. He has gotten a ton of targets. He's got a decent amount of wear and tear. I mean, probably not as much as Kamara and McCaffrey, who were complete focal points, but he was a bit of the engine and the workhorse for that Charger offense, like Bruce mentioned. I wouldn't be against it. It's all going to be about the cost, right? Especially knowing, for me, the free agent running backs or possible running backs you can acquire via trade, it's tough because the running back draft class and the draft is so strong, like everywhere, like rounds 1 through 5, even some of the guys you can get in round 6 and 7. So like that influences how I feel about getting someone like an Eckler or anybody on the open market. Really, like I like Donta Foreman. I like Samaje Perine. I would have loved Josh Jacobs if he, didn't get tagged, or even him and Saquon. But like, I don't know if the value is necessarily there given what you can acquire in the draft, the caliber of talent you can acquire in the draft, combined with the cost control effectiveness for some years going forward. Carl, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for the super chat. Carl says the Bills' first move was to get offensive line help. Yeah, exclamation point. Connor McGovern slots in as a starting right guard with Bates as the left guard. Need more offensive line help than depth. Darnell Wright, please. I co-sign this. They do need more offensive line help and depth. I'm all about Darnell Wright. I have been since the Senior Bowl. I have professed my love a multitude of times. I'm all about it. Well done. Well done. Well done. Ba-ba-ba. Oh, it's Random Cam says, you may have spoken on this. I don't know. Are you a Bijan guy? Is Bean a Bijan guy? I am a Bijan guy. I think he's one of the top 3 players in this entire draft. I think he's an elite prospect, and I think he would be an elite prospect in almost any draft that you put him in. His skill set, his ability, his vision, his contact balance, his pacing, his strength, his receiving ability, his burst, his agility, his feet, his just everything. Like he's a top 3 guy in this draft class for me. And I recognize the notion of not taking a running back in the first round. And I think there is credence to, the idea that that's not proper value if you're taking a running back in the first round. But when you're getting towards the back end of the first round, I'm fine with it. To me, that's almost like it's a second round pick. And if he's there and he's that elite, again, it depends on how the rest of the board shakes. If it's him and Darnell Wright, I'm taking Darnell Wright, because I think Darnell Wright is a very good prospect, and I think the positional need is greater. Darnell Wright's skill set and ability and fit, plus the positional need, outweighs Bijan Robinson's skill set and blue chip, talent. But I am a Bijan guy. I love him. I'd have no problem with the Bills taking him at 27. Even if the Bills took him at 27 over Darnell Wright, I would be a little annoyed, but I'd get over it because I think Bijan is tremendous. To follow up with your second point, is he there at 27? I don't think so. That's why I think a lot of this is moot. I don't think he lasts to 27. I think he, again, is one of the top 3 dudes in this draft class. I think somebody takes a swing on him and adds him. If he lasts to like the early 20s, even that, I'd be a little surprised. But, we'll see. You never know. Sometimes running backs fall. Again, it's a position that hasn't been valued too much. But even Najee Harris and Travis Etienne went in the mid-20s. We saw where Saquon went. Bijan is a significantly better prospect than Etienne and Najee Harris. You can debate who was a higher tier prospect between him and Saquon. Again, things are different. Draft classes are different. The caliber of talent, who's picking where and team needs. But I don't think Bijan lasts to 27. Draft Fanatic says, ooh, Bijan is more likely to be a Hall of Fame player than Wright. I don't know how you quantify it, but fair. Fair. Joe says, are these running backs zone or gap? I've heard people want Henry, but he was a zone rusher. We seem to only succeed in gap blocking. The Bills saw success last year in zone running. The mid zone runs, inside zone, some outside zone. That's really where James Cook is fit to live. He's got that ability to press the line of scrimmage and flow like water. Not that he can't run in gap, but he is very successful in zone runs. And we saw the Bills start to use more zone run as the year went on last year. The past 2 years, though, they have been successful with gap, to your point. 2 years ago was the pin and pull schemes. This past year, it was dart, that tackle, the tackle wrap play where they were pulling Dawkins or they were pulling Spencer Brown around and either sending him through the B gap or the C gap there around on the other side. So I think the Bills are going to mix it up, but the Bills can do either. And given the addition of Connor McGovern, I think they can still live in a zone world. They can function in gap to a degree, but I would expect more zone running based on where James Cook succeeds. Again, as of now, James Cook is RB1. And a lot of these running backs we've been talking about, like Bijan, can succeed no matter what. Like he's going to elevate your scheme and your offensive line. It doesn't matter what scheme you're running. Oh, man, what an episode that we have had here. There's a lot to talk about. There is, as we move forward here, again, keep your ears to the ground. There could be breaking news. Honestly, it's 10:43 Eastern right now. There could be breaking news in another like half hour or an hour or so, let alone what we see on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so on and so forth. The offseason has really only just begun, literally, and it has begun given legal tampering starting, free agency officially starting next week. We might see some curveballs, maybe some guys back out of some deals because they're not official yet. We saw that with Anthony Barr and the Jets and the Vikings several years ago. So we'll see what happens there. But a lot of the guys that fit what the Bills needed from a need perspective and also from a skill set and scheme perspective have kind of gone to other teams already. We've seen the safety market very active. We've seen the edge market active. We've seen some linebackers go. The receiver market has been a little quiet, but that wasn't really a tremendously strong group. We saw the Bills add Connor McGovern. We've seen some activity, but we've seen, again, a lot of guys who would fit what the Bills could use from a need perspective and a cost and value and skill set and scheme fit, amalgamation, all of that together. Some of those guys have started to go away. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Bills do going forward. Again, like we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, they restructured Stephon Diggs, so they cleared some more space. I believe they made about $5.4 million. So they continue to make space. We'll see what it's going to lead towards. The Bills have been decently quiet. Last year at this time, we saw a lot of the moves up front. I think it was last year, Wednesday, we saw the Von Miller news, but the day before last year, Tuesday, and legal tampering was, the Tim Settle moves and Daquan Jones and I believe J.D. McKissick, who got released today. That was kind of funny how that happened. So we'll see what the Bills do going forward. There are some needs on this team. As of right now, you're looking at two of them. With Tremaine Edmunds officially gone, we'll see what happens with Jordan Poyer. But as of right now, linebacker and safety are needs. I still think they need to add an edge with proven pass rush ability. Because again, I don't think Von Miller's going to be ready until the end of October or early November. That's my timeline for him. Which means you need somebody to help Gregory Rousseau. Because what do you got with AJ Epinesa and Carlos Basham? Even if you like both of them, you still need a fourth guy to work in the rotation regularly. They could use some help on the interior now that Jordan Phillips is gone. Are they bringing up someone from the practice squad? Are they bringing in a free agent? There are significant questions to answer on this team, in addition to wide receiver, potentially running back. So free agency is always, that time where you ideally are using free agency to support your roster and fill some holes here and there. Support the core guys that you brought in and developed. So we'll see what happens as free agency goes forward, in addition to seeing, what the draft holds. I'm going through my notes here and looking at some stuff and just really frustrated that a lot of the guys who I had tabbed for, again, even with what happened yesterday and throughout the day today, I had several guys who I was like, oh, here's my favorite targets going forward. And to watch a bunch of them go literally almost right before we went live tonight, it's decently frustrating, but nonetheless, state of the world and how the cookie crumbles at times. That was a shout out to Bruce, who was my guest on tonight's episode. I'm throwing up the banner that says Toodles, folks. Again, just in case you haven't, if you were watching live or watching later before you leave, please drop a like on this video. Again, it's very helpful. It helps me. It helps the entire team. So if you enjoyed this content, please drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to continue to gain more traction as a brand and as a product. So please and thank you. If you enjoyed this, drop a like on this video. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review this show, this episode, whatever have you. Honest feedback and whether positive or constructive is always tremendously appreciated. So please and thank you. Drop a rating and review. Whether you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms or watching here on YouTube, please subscribe to Disguise Coverage. It's tremendously helpful and important for myself and again the team. So please, 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 and thank you for that. Word of mouth is also helpful. Tell your family, friends, and loved ones about how awesome this show is, about how awesome my little Christmas tree is. Or if you thought the show was terrible, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day. I want to thank everyone who joined me live on this episode. As Bruce mentioned it earlier, the live chat was hopping, as it always is here on the show. I like to make this as engaging as possible and get through, the topics I want to talk about, the breakdowns and the analysis, but also like to, pull up as many comments and thoughts as I can, because the chat is always hopping with really good, insightful, thought-provoking statements and comments and questions and thoughts and analysis. So thank you very much to everybody who rode with me live here on this episode. Thank you very much to the multiple super chats that came in on this episode. John, I pulled up yours earlier. I thought it was going to be a question, but it wasn't. It was just an awesome statement and it was a generous donation. Thank you very much. Thank you to DF Forever for your multiple super chats. Thank you folks for just all the kind words, the positivity, the super chats, being here, just your overall engagement and generosity and kindness and support. It's greatly appreciated by myself and the entire team. And if you watched live, again, big ups to you. Thank you very much. If you didn't watch live, that's cool. Thank you very much for your post-live view, listen, download, whatever have you. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you very much to Bruce Nolan for joining me on this episode and breaking down this important time of the year as free agency has started for the NFL and for the Buffalo Bills. I appreciate you folks. I appreciate Bruce. Thank you very much. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well, staying safe, be kind to one another, take care of one another. I will see you next week again, live Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern for another episode of Disguised Coverage. And until then, I see all the positive stuff coming through in the chat. Thank you folks again. Greatly appreciated. So until next week, Godspeed. I hope you're all doing well. And as always, go Bills.